right, let's go to the money desk, and we're joined by Devan Murugan. And Devan, strong reaction still to the President's announcement about independent power.
Yeah, it's a very strong signal, Sally, and that's what business is telling us this afternoon. And let's start there. Analysts say today's announcement of a new threshold for companies to produce their own electricity is a so-called shock point for investor sentiment. Mineral and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe had been sticking to his proposal of a 10-megawatt generation threshold without a license. But today, President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing that that threshold will be lifted to 100 megawatts. The Minerals Council, which represents mines, has welcomed the move, saying it could attract investment worth around 27 billion rand. But the legal amendments will have to be gazetted. Registration through the energy regulator NERSA may take a few months, and projects would need to be built. Now, one analyst says the move is a dramatic signal to investors.
Yes, well, I always said we need to see a shock point where there cannot be compromise, there can't be a fudge, a very clear choice is made, and political capital is deployed. And that's exactly what we did see today. And that's why, again, I highlight that the overruling of Minister Mantashe on this is almost the more important thing, I think here, as a signal than necessarily the shift in the threshold in and of itself.
All right, I want to bring in CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, Busi Mavuso, on this. Busi, good evening. Thanks for talking to us. From an investor sentiment point of view, I suppose the real value here is the fact that the President boldly swung this threshold quite significantly on what the department was initially offering. This is no doubt a very important signal, isn't it?
It absolutely is, Devan. Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me. So this definitely strengthens the investment case for South Africa. It really makes a serious dent in solving the energy security crisis that South Africa is confronted with. Remember, the President is actually going to be attending the G7 tomorrow, and he has told us that he's carrying the message that South Africa is the strategic investment destination. But if you can't even guarantee energy security to investors, it makes that conversation very difficult. So this amendment, therefore, will allow private sector players to can generate their own electricity without a license up to 100 megawatts. So it allows the intensive energy users to come off the grid, and it therefore reduces the burden from Eskom, and Eskom can continue, operating the way it needs to operate, and can hopefully, solve their generation capacity problems a little bit more quicker.
And I suppose then, without being cynical, the real hope here would be that the administrative and the bureaucratic registration, if you like, would actually go by very quickly, and that doesn't pose any hurdles. That hope still stands that it would be quite quick.
Absolutely. I think with what the President has said, it gives us the impression and definitely the hope that it will definitely go by very quickly. But I guess the most important thing about the President's announcement today, Devan, is that it really sends the message that South Africa is open for business. It really goes a long way in terms of changing the negative sentiment that currently exists within the business fraternity to a positive sentiment. That positive sentiment will definitely, increase business confidence, and that increased business confidence will allow companies and the private sector to open up their balance sheets and ensure that they invest in the country. And with that investment, we are therefore going to see, a growth in the economy. And I think that will go a long way in terms of solving, the jobs crisis that we're currently facing as a country. So such policy changes were what we had required as a country to stimulate private sector investment. Because as you are saying, the MRC says that this is actually going to unleash about 7 billion rands into the economy, because this is what is going to be going into the erection of these power generation plants by the private sector. And I think the cases such as that of Clover, South Africa, which had to shut down their plant in Lichtenburg due to the failure of government and the municipality to supply electricity, will be less likely going into the future, because then companies are now being given a leeway and an opportunity to can actually not have to rely on the municipality, and they can actually generate their own electricity.
And that's a crucial point, isn't it? Because we've seen the closure, we've seen disinvestment in certain cases, and I think the Clover case in Lichtenburg is a casing point where they shifted to KZN. Hopefully, this now will put the brakes on certain decisions, because the municipality now gets involved, isn't it?
And You know, Clover is one case, and I think it's just one case that made the headlines. But Devan, you and I know that there are many companies which actually just pack up and go because they look at this and they say it's absolutely impossible. You know, it takes the competitiveness out of any business if you are going to be confronted with about 6 hours load shedding, you know, on a daily basis. And I think the way how this load shedding is so sporadic, and we can't even blame Eskom for it because we know the problems that Eskom is sitting with. But I think it was also a mistake for this government and for this country to think that after having hollowed out Eskom for the past 15 years, then we bring it in now and we say, Eskom, you have to be central in solving the energy crisis of this country. It was never going to happen. And I think Eskom has told us over and over again that they are struggling with their generation plants, which actually, you know, break down at no warning. That is why the CEO, Andre de Ruyter, was actually in firm support. If you remember, he was one of the few people who actually went for the 50 megawatts against, you know, the DMRE's minister's 10 megawatts. So I think they also realize and appreciate that they require their assistance. You know, we have so many dysfunctional municipalities who can't actually, you know, support these companies on the ground. You see the report from the AG on a year-to-year basis. There's very little improvement that is happening on the ground. So it therefore makes it difficult, not just for foreign direct investors, Devan, but for local investment to actually continue investing more funds into the country. So this definitely makes a critical shift, you know, for us to can start having more meaningful discussions around how we actually start to bring private sector investment into the country.
Yeah, so indeed, no end to power cuts in the next few months at least, or not overnight rather, but of course a real big uptick for business sentiment. Busi Mavuso from the Business Leadership South Africa Group, thanks very much indeed. Now, let's quickly take a look at what happened on the markets. Markets closing slightly in the negative today. After failing to gain any traction, the rand, though, made some gains against the US dollar. Let's take a look at those indicators.